Let's pick things up there with Jason Prow, partner and cognitive process automation leader at IBM Public Service, and Michael McGeehan, director of business development for government at Blue Prism. Gentlemen, thanks very much for joining me. Mike, we were talking before we went on the air. This idea of robotics process automation is probably the most cutting-edge technology that agencies are actually using in the federal government right now. Give me a kind of a thumbnail, elevator speech maybe, about RPA and how agencies are using it right now.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more, Francis. You know, as we look at the landscape in the public sector, it's a very exciting time, right, with emerging technologies, in particular robotic process automation. So, you know, I like to describe things, you know, or talk about RPA as a capability. At the end of the day, it's a piece of software, but it's meant to move, you know, mundane rote work up and out of, you know, the human and move it into kind of what we call a robot or a digital worker, and really shift and lift that work. You know, when we think about automation and the automation stream, we're talking about, you know, RPA on one side, you know, analogous to the human body, sort of the arms and legs and the doing side of automation, and then turning that to the other side, and we're talking about, you know, the other side being the brain and the cognitive side of automation. But in order to do this effectively, organizations need to work across that continuum at the speed of the mission.
Jason, the Internet of Things is potentially a huge opportunity for people to leverage RPA. What do you see as the nexus of that today, and what do you see on the horizon for people and organizations that are thinking about the merger of these two ideas?
Yeah, the two technologies really are emerging and actually pretty complementary to one another in that they help both improve kind of the control of the information and the process underlying it, but then also enable some analysis. And so I see the two very complementary, but then also working together very well in that you have IoT providing the sensors that capture the data, and then you have RPA that's available to kind of pool the data, do the analysis, but then I think more importantly is start to take action on some of the trends that are being seen in the transactional data.
So it sounds like then the next generation of that, or the next step after that, is applying a little bit of artificial intelligence to that to perform some of the rote analytics to then give humans really decisive information to be able to think about.
Absolutely. I think giving humans the information to do something with, but I think the evolution of that as well is also having the automation or the robot now go take action instead of having the human do that when capable and available.
Michael, what's step 1, 2, and 3 for the agencies that have been successful with RPA already that would apply no matter what the mission, no matter what the intended outcome is?
So I think, you know, as we talk about this, you know, it's a little bit of change management, right? So we're all used to working people and process. We talk about it as thinking robot. So, you know, there's a vision or a strategy of how you kind of embrace this new technology, right? So across a lens of, you know, where do we want to start, right? So a pilot with production intent, but also focused on the mission, right? The customer, the citizen experience and how it's impacted there. And equally important, the employees, right? How do you help them understand what this is and what this is not? And, you know, meant to be, in a way, you know, a digital assistant or a digital worker helping them do their job more productively.
One of the ways that the Treasury Department's doing that, and one of the ways that I imagine other agencies, Jason, could leverage, is they've engaged their employees from the very beginning, essentially telling their employees, tell us what jobs you do repetitively, and let's help you figure out a way that you don't have to do that anymore.
Yeah, that really helps with the adoption of this emerging technology, and that it's not just applying the technology to the work, it's actually taking the work off of the employee's task list, which is typically overextended already. So it really does help with the adoption of it. And then you also get the workers to feel a little bit more comfortable with a new concept, an emerging technology that they may not have been aware of previously.
So the core element of this, from what you're both telling me, sounds like the key to success in an RPA initiative is not to think about it as an RPA initiative. It's to think about it as whatever the mission delivery is, fill in the blank, and think about RPA as the methodology to achieve whatever the mission outcome you want is.
I would agree with that. It's also an enabler of the work as opposed to something brand new. But I agree with that.
Right, and I agree with that. You know, we talk about it as a robotic operating model. So if you're approaching this and, you know, process and the people weren't in place, what would you do, right? With a you know, a digital worker and a human worker working side by side. So how would you redefine that? And if you want to call that, you know, shaping, you know, the workforce of the 21st century, or the future of work, you know, that's really where, you know, organizations are driving.
You used that term earlier, thinking robot. Give me a little bit more on that, because I think that idea is going to be instrumental down the line for organizations that are trying to figure out what's the best way to use this technology once they've decided, yes, this looks like this makes sense for us to deliver on whatever the mission is.
Yeah, so around the playbook or the robotic operating model, a lot of this has to do with the governance and the structure. How do you ingest new automations? How do you, you know, build them out over time and get to scale and enterprise uses, interagency, cross-agency? So, you know, as we look at that, you know, it's really, you know, kind of starting from the ground up and building with that playbook in mind and driving forward.
Jason, I want to go back to the workforce idea for a moment. What's important for agencies to think about as they're looking at building a digital workforce, both in hiring people, but also in looking for the skills that are useful among the folks they already have? Maybe they're not even IT people. Maybe there are people who think a certain way or do their jobs a certain way that would port well to thinking about an RPA environment.
Yeah, whenever we talk about getting started and looking at how it's going to impact the workforce or how it's going to be adopted at scale, we usually talk about first getting started, but getting started with intent, meaning understanding what are you trying to achieve, what's the impact on the workforce, but then also what's the impact on the underlying systems and the infrastructure associated with that, to ensure that as you move beyond a prototype that you're prepared to actually take this into production. And really the key around the prototype is really starting to understand the value of the technology, but the implications on the workforce and whether you need to retrain or reskill workers, or if you can identify individuals that pick it up without much effort, you can then have them begin to adopt that and be the champions moving forward.
And just building on that for a minute, you know, as we think about robot, right, we have policies and procedures in place that are all geared towards the human, right? So when we talk about, you know, security and the implications of putting digital workers in place, one of the first reactions is, this is not a human, this is a robot. We don't have a policy, we don't have a procedure. So there's this notion of change management and adoption that, you know, along that continuum and as part of the intelligent automation journey.
Michael McGeehan, Jason Prow, thanks both very much for joining me. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Emerging technology like RPA has ushered in a new paradigm for federal agencies. Software as a consumer product. More entrepreneurial government, IoT, next.
Entrepreneurial Government is brought to you in part by Blue Prism. Discover how Blue Prism can help your agency drive operational agility and deliver an impactful citizen experience using RPA. Visit blueprism.com/gov.